Aiden Keller's day had already started off like a train wreck. But the moment his elbow knocked over the paper cup of hot coffee and it splashed across a stranger's crisp white blouse, he knew it had just hit rock bottom. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he said, instantly grabbing napkins from the counter with one hand while holding his 5-year-old daughter, Sadie, with the other. The woman stood frozen, her coat folded over her arm, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. Coffee dripped down the front of her blouse like a crime scene. She looked at him slowly, her expression unreadable. "Well," she muttered, dabbing the top of her button down with a napkin, "that's one way to start the day." Aiden winced. "I didn't see you. I was trying to get my daughter to the window seat before she spilled her muffin all over the floor. I swear, I didn't mean to." "I got it," she said, more calmly than he expected. Her voice was smooth, low, like someone who didn't get rattled easily. "It's just coffee." Sadie peeked out from behind Aiden's leg. "Hi," she said quietly. "My dad says sorry a lot." The woman blinked, then did something unexpected. She laughed. It wasn't snarky or forced. Just a soft, surprised sound, like she hadn't laughed in a while and wasn't sure how to start again. "I'm Madeline Trent," she said, crouching slightly to Sadie's level, "and that's okay. I spill things too." Aiden glanced down at the mess on her blouse. "Look, let me buy you another coffee, or dry cleaning, or a blouse, just something. I feel awful." She tilted her head, curious. "You want to buy me a blouse?" "I mean, not in a weird way," Aiden rushed out, cheeks flushing. "Just trying to make it right." Madeline studied him for a beat. She looked expensive. Half the people in the cafe probably assumed she was someone's agent or an actress, but there was something behind her eyes, tired, maybe, or just lonely. She finally nodded. "Okay, coffee, but you're not buying me a blouse." "Deal," he muttered, relieved. They sat near the window. Sadie munched on her muffin, swinging her legs as Aiden handed Madeline a fresh latte. He tried not to notice how she crossed her legs or how her perfume smelled like something from a dream he couldn't afford. "You always crash into people before 9 a.m., she asked, taking a sip. "Only the ones dressed better than me." She smiled, "So, everyone." He laughed, surprised. "Pretty much." There was a beat of silence, but not an awkward one, just warm enough that he noticed it. "What do you do?" she asked, stirring her drink. Aiden looked down at Sadie. "I'm a mechanic, my own garage, small place, nothing fancy. I do side work too, whatever helps keep this one in sneakers and string cheese." Madeline glanced at Sadie, who grinned mid-muffin. "You're a single dad." He nodded. "Her mom left when she was 2, haven't seen her since. It's just us." Her expression softened. "That's a lot." He shrugged. "It's life." "And what about you?" he asked. "What do you do?" Madeline paused for half a second. "I work in business, management." "Sounds important." "It pays the dry cleaning bills." He chuckled. "Well, lucky for you, I offered to cover those." She smiled again, but this time it lingered. They talked for another 20 minutes. About childhood cartoons, about Sadie's obsession with dinosaurs, about how Aiden once tried to fix a toaster and accidentally tripped the power in his apartment for 3 hours. Eventually, Madeline glanced at her watch and stood. "I have to go. Thank you for the coffee and the apology." "Wait," Aiden said, standing too, brushing his hand through his messy hair. "I know this is probably insane, but can I see you again? I mean, not in a coffee-spilling way, just, I like talking to you." Madeline looked at him, her expression unreadable again. Then she pulled out a business card and handed it to him. "You can call my office." He raised an eyebrow. "Office?" "Just call," she said, giving Sadie a wink. "It was nice meeting you both." And just like that, she walked out. Aiden looked down at the card. No title, no company logo, just a number. He sighed, slipping it into his pocket. "Well, kid," he said to Sadie, "I think I just spilled coffee on someone way out of our league." Sadie stared at the door Madeline had disappeared through. I liked her. "Yeah," Aiden said softly. "Me too." 3 days passed before Aiden called the number. He'd stared at that card every night, told himself it was pointless. But the way she'd looked at him like he wasn't just some broke single dad in oil-stained jeans, it stuck with him. When the call connected, he expected a receptionist. Instead, her voice answered directly. "Madeline Trent." He froze. "It's Aiden from the cafe, the coffee assassin." She laughed. "I was starting to think you wouldn't call." "I almost didn't." "Why?" "Because I'm not exactly in your world." There was a pause, then quietly, "Maybe I'm tired of mine." That night, they met again. No coffee this time, just two people walking around the park while Sadie chased squirrels with a stick. And that's how it began, not with roses or champagne, but with spilled coffee, a 5-year-old with muffin crumbs on her face, and a woman who hadn't told him yet that she ran one of the largest marketing firms in the city. Because Madeline Trent, CEO, millionaire, and woman who hadn't let anyone in for years, was already falling in love with a poor dad who had no idea who she really was. Madeline adjusted the silk scarf loosely tied around her neck, glancing once at her reflection in the blacked-out car window before stepping onto the sidewalk. The driver remained silent, trained not to ask questions. She didn't explain why she was being dropped off in a quiet residential neighborhood with cracked pavement and sun-faded mailboxes. She didn't owe anyone an explanation, and yet a strange flutter of nerves twisted in her stomach. At the corner, Aiden was crouched beside an old pickup truck, sleeves rolled up, grease streaked along his forearm. He looked up at the sound of her heels, straightening with a surprised grin. "I didn't expect you to actually come," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "I thought your version of let's meet again meant something more. Espresso and linen." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "So you assumed I was bluffing?" "I assumed you had better places to be." "Maybe I'm exactly where I want to be." His grin faltered, just for a moment, like he hadn't expected that kind of answer. Then he motioned toward the open garage door behind him. "Well, welcome to my kingdom of busted engines and loose bolts." She stepped inside, the scent of motor oil and metal sharp in the air. The space was cluttered, but organized tools hung with care, parts labeled, and a radio hummed something old and bluesy in the background. "Is this where the magic happens?" she asked, trailing her fingers along a workbench. "Magic's a strong word, more like stubborn machines and scraped knuckles. You don't strike me as the type who hangs out in garages." "I don't," she said, her voice quiet, "but I wanted to see where you spend your days." He hesitated. "Why?" "Because I'm curious, about you." Aiden didn't answer right away. He tossed the rag onto the bench and leaned against a rusted Mustang, arms crossed loosely. "Most people aren't." Madeline met his gaze. "Then most people are idiots." He laughed, a sound that rolled out of him slowly. "You always say things like that, just straight-up truth." "Only when I think someone needs to hear it." Before he could respond, a small voice called out from behind a stack of tires. "Daddy, I finished it." Sadie emerged, holding a sheet of paper covered in crayon. "I drew your car, and the lady too." Madeline crouched down, accepting the drawing with a soft smile. Her figure was taller than Aiden's, with a massive sun and hearts circling her head. "I look very powerful," she said. "You are," Sadie said simply, then skipped over to a pile of coloring books stacked near a folding chair. Aiden watched the exchange with quiet amusement. She doesn't usually open up that fast. Madeline stood, folding the drawing carefully. Maybe she just knows a good ally when she sees one. There was a pause, the kind that felt like it could tip into something heavier. Aiden tapped his fingers against the hood. You ever think about getting out of the city? She tilted her head. What do you mean? I don't know, leaving behind the noise, the pressure, living somewhere quieter. Slower, where people know your name and not just your title. Her breath hitched, barely. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. Well, he said, brushing a hand through his hair, maybe someone should. She looked at him for a long beat. Where would you go? Somewhere with trees, space, maybe a backyard that doesn't smell like car exhaust. Sadie's been asking about a garden. Tomatoes, she says, no idea why. You want a garden. I want her to have one. Madeline felt something pull inside her. Not a rush, not lest it was deeper. A quiet yearning, one she hadn't let herself feel in years. Everything in her life had been about control. Strategy. Building walls no one could see through. But Aiden wasn't trying to climb those walls. He didn't even seem to realize they were there. She pulled her gaze away. I should go. He didn't stop her, just nodded once and walked her to the sidewalk. As she opened the car door, he said, You never told me what kind of business you're in. She paused, one hand on the handle. Does it matter? He shrugged, not to me, but I get the feeling it matters to you. She gave him a long look, then got in without answering. The car pulled away slowly, leaving Aiden standing under the flickering garage sign. He reached for the rag again, but his hands weren't steady. Inside the car, Madeline stared out the window, heart racing. She had never brought anyone into her world not fully, and here she was, stepping into his instead. Later that night, she stood in her penthouse, shoes kicked off, hair pulled down from its tight twist. She poured a glass of wine and walked out to the balcony, city lights flickering below. Her assistant had emailed 3 times about the gala on Friday, a room full of investors, cameras, expectations. But all she could think about was Sadie's drawing, and the way Aiden had said, somewhere with trees, like it was a prayer. She didn't realize she was still holding the paper until the wine glass tilted and sloshed onto her wrist. The drawing was safe. She folded it once, then tucked it into the drawer beside her bed. She didn't sleep easily that night. And neither did Aiden. Because for the first time in a long time, he'd met someone who made him wonder if the life he'd built with his own 2 hands might not be the only thing worth holding onto. The gala was held at the Langley Hotel, where the chandeliers glowed like captured stars and the waiters moved in silence, dressed sharper than most men on Wall Street. A 15-piece orchestra played somewhere behind a wall of glass and orchids. Everyone in the room wore money like cologne. And Madeline stood at the center of it all, a sapphire gown brushing the floor as she nodded through introductions and half listened to compliments that meant nothing. Her assistant hovered nearby, whispering names and credentials, but none of it registered. She hadn't wanted to come. The moment she stepped out of the car, she'd realized she didn't care about the deal being announced upstairs or the 7-figure contract waiting for her signature. Because all she could think about was a backyard. And tomatoes. And a man who'd never been in a room like this, and probably never would. She excused herself from a conversation about emerging markets and walked to the far end of the ballroom, where the noise thinned out near the windows. She stared down at the city, glittering and distant, and wondered if Aiden was still at the garage, finishing a job under bad lighting with Sadie drawing chalk hearts on the pavement outside. You look like you want to disappear, a voice said behind her. Madeline didn't turn. Do I? Only a little. It was Evelyn, her closest friend from university, and the only person in the room who didn't care about her title. Tall and direct, Evelyn always wore black and spoke like she was editing your soul. Is this about the board? They're already chewing on the merger. It'll pass. It's not about the board. Madeline took a sip of champagne and let the bubbles sting her throat. It's about all of this. I don't feel like I belong in it anymore. Evelyn studied her for a beat. You've belonged here since we were 22, and you talked a VC firm into investing in a company that didn't even exist yet. Madeline shook her head. That was a version of me I built out of necessity. I'm starting to wonder what's left underneath it. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. You met someone. There was no point in denying it. He has a daughter, he runs a garage, and he has no idea who I am. Then he's either the best thing to happen to you. Evelyn trailed off, sipping her drink, or the most dangerous. Madeline finally met her eyes. Why dangerous? Because he's not part of this world, he doesn't owe you anything. He won't be impressed by your money or your power. If he walks away, he won't look back. Madeline looked down at her glass, suddenly aware of how heavy it felt. I don't want him impressed, just want him to see me. Evelyn stepped closer. Then show him, but do it before someone else tells him first. Madeline didn't respond. She already knew Evelyn was right. The following evening, she drove herself. No driver, no security detail. Just her, behind the wheel of a car she hadn't touched since her early 30s, parked 2 blocks from Aiden's garage. She found him in the back lot, hands deep in the hood of a Range Rover that had seen better decades. Sadie was nearby, perched on a stool, holding a flashlight steady with the seriousness of a surgeon. Madeline stayed quiet for a moment, watching them. The way Aiden patiently explained things without dumbing them down. The way Sadie nodded, absorbing every word like gospel. You should charge for lessons, she said, finally stepping forward. Aiden looked up startled. Didn't hear you pull in. I figured I'd try showing up without destroying your wardrobe this time. Sadie grinned. Daddy said you were probably busy being the president of something. Madeline laughed, close enough. Aiden wiped his hands and came over, his expression unreadable. What are you doing here? I wanted to talk, away from coffee shops and coloring books. He glanced at Sadie. Give us a minute, okay? Sadie nodded and wandered toward the side fence, humming to herself. Madeline took a breath. Haven't been honest with you. I let you believe something that wasn't true. Aiden's jaw tightened. Are you married? She blinked. What? No, God no. Then what is it? I'm not just someone who works in business. I run a firm, a big one. I'm a CEO. I didn't tell you because I needed a place where I wasn't that. I thought maybe I could be just me. He stared at her, silent. I know it sounds selfish, but I liked how you looked at me, like I was a person, not a press release. Aiden leaned back against the car, arms crossed. Why tell me now? Because you deserve to know. And because if this goes any further, if I keep showing up at your shop and letting your daughter draw me with hearts over my head, then I want it to be real. No lies, no hiding. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I've never met a woman like you, and not because of the title. That's not what caught my attention. What did? You listened. Most people don't. You asked things that weren't small talk, and you didn't flinch when I said I was raising her alone. Madeline stepped closer. So where does that leave us? Aiden hesitated. It leaves us here, standing in the middle of my lot, trying to figure out if a guy with grease under his nails and a woman who gets invited to galas can make this work. She reached for his hand. I think we can. His fingers curled around her slowly. Then, I guess I'll need a clean shirt for whatever's next. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but the look in his eyes said it was coming, not in haste, not under pressure. But when it happened, it would mean something. Madeline didn't need a ballroom. She didn't need a headline. She needed this. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to want it. The sky over the city was bruising into twilight when Aiden reached the rooftop. He hadn't been sure what to expect when Madeline told him to meet her at the Astoria. All she'd said was, "Come tonight, bring Sadie, and wear something you wouldn't wear to work." So he had. A charcoal button-up he'd forgotten he owned, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows, paired with the cleanest pair of trousers he could find. Sadie had insisted on braiding her own hair, and she now clutched a small stuffed dinosaur in one hand and a glittery purse in the other, clearly taking the occasion more seriously than either of them. They stepped out of the private elevator and into a rooftop garden that didn't look like it belonged anywhere near a city skyline. Lanterns hung from curved trellises overgrown with jasmine. A long table was set under a canopy of lights, covered in glassware and soft gray linens. A string quartet played low in the corner, half hidden by manicured hedges and topiary. And at the far end of the table, Madeline waited. Aiden let out a slow breath. "You didn't mention this was going to feel like walking into a movie." Sadie beamed. "It smells like flowers and cupcakes." Madeline approached, her heels clicking softly over polished stone. Her dress shimmered in the fading light, not sequined or showy, but elegant, like it had been stitched from dusk itself. "You made it," she said, voice warm and steady. "You really rented a rooftop?" Aiden asked, glancing around. "I didn't rent it," she said calmly. "I own the building. I just haven't used this space in a long time." Sadie tugged on Aiden's sleeve. "Can we eat here every night?" Madeline laughed. "I don't think the quartet would agree to that, but tonight, it's all yours." They took their seats, and as the first course was served a delicate arrangement of roasted vegetables and handmade pasta, Aiden leaned slightly toward her. "So what's the occasion?" Madeline rested her fingers lightly on the edge of her glass. "I've been thinking a lot about the future." "Of the company." "No," she said, eyes steady on his. "Of us." Aiden's brow lifted. "I've spent years building something that was never meant to comfort me. It was meant to protect me, to keep me from needing anyone, but I don't want that anymore." He didn't answer immediately. He reached for his water, took a slow sip, then set it down. "You're used to making decisions that affect hundreds of people. I get that. But me, Sadie, we're not just another project to plan." "I know," she said simply. "That's why I'm not planning anything. I'm asking." He leaned back, studying her. "Asking what?" "If you'd ever consider letting me be part of your life. Not just on rooftops or in quiet moments between work and exhaustion. I mean fully, permanently." Her words didn't land like an ambush. They settled like a truth that had been waiting for air. Aiden looked at Sadie, who now happily devoured a tiny tart and swung her legs beneath the chair. She looked up and grinned, cheeks full. "Are we staying here forever, Daddy?" He turned back to Madeline. "I've never seen her trust someone this fast." "I feel the same way," she said, "and I don't trust easily." The quartet shifted songs, something slower, softer, threading through the warm night air. "I don't have a lot to offer," he said, "not compared to this. I can't whisk you off to Bali or buy out a floor at a hotel." "I don't need any of that," she said. "I've had everything. I want something real, something I didn't earn with a contract or a signature." He tapped his fingers gently on the table. "And what about the firm?" "Still mine," she said, "but I've handed off the day-to-day. I'm stepping back." His surprise was evident. "I told the board last week," she added. "I'm keeping my seat, but I'm done living in the office. There's more I want now." He looked at her, really looked, and finally said, "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure." They didn't need more words after that. They ate. They laughed. Sadie told stories about her imaginary Dino school and insisted on showing Madeline how to do a cartwheel in the corner of the rooftop garden. Madeline tried and failed gracefully, which earned her a tight hug and a declaration of "You're kinda awesome." Later, when the stars had fully claimed the sky and the string quartet had packed up, Aiden stood with Madeline near the edge of the rooftop. The city lights sprawled beneath them. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't want to fall for someone who could leave with a phone call." "I was scared too," she whispered, "but I'm not leaving." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to him. He opened it, brows furrowing. Inside was a key. "To what?" "To a house, on the edge of the city, with a backyard and enough room for tomatoes." He exhaled sharply. "You bought a house." "I bought a home," she corrected, "and I want to share it with you, with Sadie, if you'll let me." He looked down at the key, then back at her. "You're serious?" "Completely." He didn't speak. Instead, he stepped forward, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. It was slow, deep, certain, the kind of kiss that didn't ask questions, it answered them. Sadie clapped behind them. "Finally." They both laughed, and Aiden swept her up in his arms, spinning her once before setting her down beside them. "So," he said, arm around Madeline's waist, "do we plant tomatoes or strawberries first?" "Both," she said. "We can have everything." And maybe, for the first time in his life, Aiden believed it. The first morning in the new house was quiet, the kind of quiet that came with space, real space, that didn't echo with the sounds of traffic or the hum of an elevator shaft. Aiden stood in the kitchen barefoot, watching sunlight pour through the wide windows. The counters gleamed faintly under the early light, and a small ceramic pot sat in the center of the island. Already holding the first tomato sprout, Sadie insisted they start indoors before planting outside. He turned at the sound of soft footsteps behind him. Madeline came in wearing one of his old t-shirts, her hair still tousled from sleep, carrying 2 mugs. She handed him one without saying a word and leaned into him, resting her cheek briefly against his shoulder. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then she murmured, "I didn't think I'd ever feel this kind of peace." "I didn't think I'd ever be part of someone else's dream," he said quietly. They heard the creak of a door upstairs and then the pitter of small feet. Sadie appeared in the doorway, her arms full of colored paper. "Can we hang these in the garden room?" she asked, holding up a crayon-covered sign that read, "Welcome to the Dino Jungle." Madeline smiled and crouched, "Only if I get to help." Sadie agreed on the condition that Madeline would also wear a dino tail, which she accepted without hesitation. Aiden watched them walk off together, his daughter chatting excitedly, and realized he'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. By afternoon, the garden was alive with laughter. Aiden spent the time assembling a bench while Sadie and Madeline painted small clay pots in wild colors. Every so often, Madeline would glance over her shoulder to check on him, and he'd meet her gaze with a look that said everything he didn't need to say out loud. Later, when Sadie had gone inside to call her best friend with updates about the new habitat, Aiden joined Madeline under the trellis she'd had installed at the edge of the yard. Vines hadn't grown in yet, but she already saw what it would look like. He could see it in her eyes. He handed her a glass of lemonade, and she took it with a quiet thank you. "You're settling into this faster than I expected," he said. "I think I was always meant for this," she admitted. "I just didn't know it." Running companies in heels and giving orders from boardrooms doesn't exactly scream backyard gardening. She glanced up at him, chin tilted slightly. "You think can't handle both." He grinned. "I know better than to underestimate you now." She reached into her pocket and held out a small folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "A list," she said, "of things I want to do with you, with Sadie, with us." Aiden unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. At the top, "Things that matter." The list was short but powerful. Build a treehouse. Teach Sadie how to ride a bike. Learn to cook something that doesn't come in a delivery bag. Take a road trip with no destination. Celebrate every little win. He looked up at her, heart tight. You're not just in this, are you? No, she said, I'm all in. They didn't rush the kiss. It wasn't about passion tonight. It was about certainty. About the quiet understanding that everything that had led them here, the spilled coffee, the withheld truths, the rooftop dinner, had all been worth it. They spent the evening in the hammock strung between two young maple trees, wrapped in a blanket, while Sadie curled up between them with her stuffed dinosaur and drifted off. Madeline whispered, "Do you ever think about what's next?" Aiden brushed his fingers through her hair. This is next. This is everything. 3 months later, the treehouse was finished. Sadie had helped paint the railing in bright coral and mint. Aiden had built it by hand, and Madeline had insisted on installing solar-powered fairy lights. Friends visited for weekend barbecues. Evelyn came by once, took one look at the garden and said, "Well, you didn't implode. Owe someone $50. She stayed for dinner and later sent a set of engraved garden tools as a housewarming gift. Madeline hired someone to run operations full-time at the firm. She kept a hand in major decisions, but she no longer lost sleep to boardroom clocks. She said yes to charity events that mattered and no to anything that didn't. And Aiden, he expanded the garage. Not because he wanted more money, but because he finally had the time and help to do it right. He hired 2 local teens as apprentices and taught them how to diagnose engine trouble by sound alone. One crisp Sunday in late November, while raking leaves into a giant pile for Sadie to jump into, he pulled a small velvet box from his back pocket. "Hey," he said to Madeline, who had just emerged from the house holding mugs of cider. She paused, catching the look on his face. He knelt, not with a practiced speech or a crowd watching, but with a simple, steady voice. "I built a life, you brought it to life. Will you marry me?" Madeline stared, cider forgotten, hands trembling just slightly. "Yes," she said, as if she'd known the answer for a long time. 1,000 times yes. Sadie screamed from the top of the treehouse. "Does this mean I get to wear a sparkly dress?" "Yes," Madeline called back, laughing through tears. "And you're the flower girl." They married in the backyard the following spring. The ceremony was small, with wildflowers tucked into everything and Sadie walking down the aisle tossing petals like confetti. Aiden wore a navy suit that Madeline had secretly had tailored for him, and Madeline wore a dress that made him forget how to breathe. Their vows were simple, honest, real. Afterward, under a canopy of stars and string lights, they danced barefoot in the grass while Sadie twirled in circles nearby. Madeline rested her head against his chest. "You know what I never expected?" she whispered. "What?" "That the best thing to ever happen to me would be a coffee accident." He kissed her forehead. "You never spilled again, though. I think that means we're meant to be." They laughed, and he pulled her closer. And in that moment, surrounded by family, by love, by a life they'd chosen together, they knew they'd already built something unshakable. Not perfect, but real. Forever.